Welcome to the Arlington Archives, the podcast that dives deep into the stories that shape the American Dream City. As Arlington celebrates 150 years of history and progress, we're bringing you the voices and legacies that make this city a cornerstone of Texas and a proud part of America's story. I'm your host, O.K. Carter, and this esteemed scholar to my left and the historian is today's co-host, Vicki Bryant. She's the world's greatest expert on the history of gambling in Arlington and also the creator and director of one of the region's most fascinating historical landmarks, the O Hill Terrace Museum at Arlington Baptist University. Welcome to the podcast, Vicki.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Stick around through all the podcasts about Arlington, and you become an expert on this city's colorful history. Let's get started. Okay, so now, if you're the world's greatest expert on gambling in Arlington, who would be runner-up?
Let me think. I think it would be you.
Oh, well, thank you. I had to work on that one for you. Okay, there are, when it comes to gambling in Arlington, there are two primary focuses, and I'm going to talk a little bit first about Arlington Downs racetrack, and then there's your particular gig, the Top of the Hill Terrace Casino. Okay, now, W.T. Wagner, William Thomas Wagner, was a rancher, oil man, banker, and one of Texas's most influential horsemen. He left an indelible mark on the state's sporting and cultural landscape through his creation of Arlington Downs. He was a lifelong breeder and enthusiast of thoroughbred racing, so Wagner envisioned a world-class facility that would elevate Texas horse racing to national prominence. In 1929, he brought that vision to life, investing $2 million to build Arlington Downs on his expansive 3D stock farm in Arlington. That would be about $40 million in today's dollars. The track was right on the Bankhead Highway, Division Street and also a short 2 blocks away from an interurban electric trolley. Okay, so Wagner was the first big investor, but not the last, to figure out how convenient a location Arlington was to Dallas-Fort Worth and all of North Texas. The racetrack was more than a business venture. It was a statement of ambition. Designed as a luxury venue with a grandstand, clubhouse, landscape grounds, and hundreds of horse stalls, Arlington Downs quickly became the premier racing destination in Texas, although construction had begun in 1927. By its opening in 1929, the facility drew enormous crowds, hundreds of thousands, according to contemporary accounts. They came from both the spectacle of horse racing and the promise of a modern entertainment venue. Now, Wagner's influence extended beyond architecture and breeding. He was a driving force behind the legalization of parimutuel betting in Texas, lobbying alongside his sons to secure legislative approval in 1933. That's approval for parimutuel betting. Their success transformed Arlington Downs into a thriving enterprise with daily profits soaring and attendance booming. As successful as it was, this was short-lived. Wagner himself died in 1934, just as the track reached its peak, and the repeal of parimutuel betting in 1937 ended the racetrack's golden era. As successful as it was, we were in a depression, and all kinds of people opposed betting. We're going to find out who the main one of those was in a second. And still, Arlington Downs remains a testament to Wagner's vision. It was an ambitious blend of sports, spectacle, and civic pride that shaped Arlington's identity as a regional entertainment hub. And now, get back to you, Mr. Bryant. So let's get back to what happened to how the Top of the Hill Casino was created, because the horse racing took place during the day. So that leaves lots of big spenders around with plenty of money to spend at night. So I'm going to let you pick up on the history of that.
Okay. They would travel down the Bankhead Highway, come to Top of the Hill where they could gamble. And I understand there was no charge for the food there, and it was probably the only place to gamble in the area at that time.
Yeah, that kind of venue.
Right.
So who would have been our main instigators of this Top of the Hill Casino? By the way, although horse racing and betting on horses was legal, the Top of the Hill never was.
Well, Fred Browning kind of passed himself off as the plumber, but he was busy behind the scenes with casinos in Houston, Oklahoma, and he had some gaming operations in Fort Worth he was partnership in, not all at the same time.
I did not know this until we talked earlier before the show, because I had always read that he just ran this sort of mobile moving card games in various hotels at Fort Worth. I didn't know that he had a history of putting together gambling endeavors in places like Houston and Oklahoma.
Right, and both of those places were raided by the Texas Rangers. So I found it kind of odd that he was brave enough to establish Top of the Hill after being raided a couple of times by the Texas Rangers already, but he established Top of the Hill.
Yeah, I think you're going to give us a little bit more history about it, about how the Top of Hill came to being, but I think it's kind of clear in hindsight that there's no way that you can operate an illegal casino in a place like Arlington, the Tarrant County, without the, I guess, the considerable looking the other way by assorted political figures.
Right.
It just can't happen. That's a long time ago now, so we'll never know who those assorted political figures were, but that's kind of the way things were done. And also, keep in mind, we're in the middle of the Depression, and so despite that, Fred Browning creates this sort of booming endeavor. Can you give me a little history on how he came to be at his current location and what's there now?
Well, it started out as a tea room. Beulah Marshall opened it, and when Fred wanted his own place, he purchased it from her.
Yeah, several years, what, 27, 26?
Right. I think he started purchasing portions of the property, and by 1930, 31, I think he was probably operating then.
Yeah, I think he assumed from the get-go that Wagner would be successful with his horse racing endeavors. Why is it called Top of Hill?
Because the tea room was called Top of Hill.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a geographic. If people, you can go tour the facility by appointment.
Right.
But if you go up there, you're on top of a very high bluff. I don't know if it's the highest point in Arlington, but it's got to be close.
We're one of the highest points. I would say second highest.
Yeah. So if you look west, particularly after the sun goes down, you have this sort of great landscape.
Beautiful view
of Fort Worth. Okay, so he bought basically a tea room.
Right.
And I'm told that he literally moved the house and built an underground casino there.
He did.
Tell me about it.
Well, when he moved in, at first he had gambling. He would put up his bedroom furniture at night, pull out the gambling equipment, and they'd gamble in his bedroom. And then he decided to move the house and put in the basement and move the house back over. And that's where most of the gambling took place. And he had a mid-floor over the top of the casino where he had people stationed there who could look through air vents down onto the gaming tables to make sure no one was cheating. And on the main floor, he had people standing behind two-way mirrors, too. So it was like an eye in the sky there at the top of the hill.
The place has pretty good security. I mean, you have if you drive down that, what's that address, by the way?
3001 West Division.
3001 West Division. So at the time, that would have been outside the city limits.
Right.
And not in the Fort Worth city limits either.
That's correct. Tarrant County.
So you're out in the county area. And he had pretty good security, did he not?
He did. He had that front gate with a guard tower. And when people pulled up there, someone would come out of the tower and open up the gate and let him through. But if they thought a raid was taking place, they'd calmly grab the other side and step on this golf tee like things sticking up out of the ground. And the police thought that was releasing the gate. That was setting off an alarm. So he was ready.
Yeah. It's about, 300 yards from the gate to the actual casino, right?
It's 900 feet.
Well, that would be 300. Is that right? Yeah, 300 yards. There you go. So, by the way, I think it's funny is that there's Fred Browning, and at some point in this endeavor, we get another famous gambler involved with that, which would be Benny the Cowboy Binion.
Correct.
Can you tell me a little bit about Benny?
Well, he was there so much, and sometimes he spent the night there. Somebody told me that they thought he was winning back money for Fred Browning. And he even spent the night in the horse barn in the loft area.
Yeah, he's a world-class poker player, by the
Right.
way. And later on, he'll take his money that he makes from the top of the hill and opens the horseshoe. But
Right.
really not much way around it. Binion is, and his relatives out there will have to excuse me, he's a gangster.
Right.
You know, he's been up on murder charges. He's a rough guy. I never could figure out if he horned his way into the enterprise or if Fred Browning just needed some muscle in there that people would respect, because that's the kind of operation that all kinds of people would try to take over if
Right.
you give him a chance.
There was probably both.
Yeah, you think it's a little both? He wanted part of it, the action, and part of it's not.
Right.
Okay, so
I did get a call from his son.
did you?
I did.
Did you, because you badmouthed this daddy, or?
No, I don't badmouth him. I'm careful what I say and do because I can put my life in danger.
I got you. Well, the Binions are pretty famous. I think most of they're still involved in the gambling industry, but
They
I
are.
think it's mostly Louisiana now, is it not?
I think
Yeah,
so.
I think they've sort of left Vegas. Okay, so tell me what the casino was like. You years ago you showed me the casino. By then was the lunchroom
Right.
for the University for Baptist
Arlington Baptist.
University. So, but originally it was all underground.
Right.
And if there was a raid, and there were a couple of three,
About 7.
7 raids, so it wasn't like they didn't. I always felt like they probably knew when the raids were coming for the most part, except for maybe the last one. So what happens when you have a raid?
They would start running out the escape tunnels, and we have more than one documentation of that. And they would run up in the tea garden where they had food and drinks planted.
Yeah, I encourage people, if you're ever there and you go in the door, you walk immediately behind you when you walk in the back door of the administration building is a terrace area.
Right.
Yeah, and kind of a tea terrace.
Right.
And you can sort of go out the tunnel and then going up to the terrace, and then by the time the gendarmes show up, everybody's up there sipping tea.
Right.
By the way, when did Prohibition end?
33.
Yeah, initially, you got free-flowing booze there as well.
Well, they had a big celebration at top of the hill to celebrate the repeal of Prohibition, and 100 people attended there. And I do have documented Jack Dempsey was one of them.
Yeah, there have been an incredible number of celebrity people,
Right.
who both came to gamble there and who entertained there over the years. I never could figure out where this entertainment took place, though.
Most of it in the tea garden on that.
So outdoor kind of stuff.
Right. And when it rained, they had to go downstairs in the casino, and they said it was really crowded to do that.
Yeah, I bet you. So I know you got John Wayne, you got Jack Dempsey, Ginger Rogers. There's a lot of high-level celebrities. Plus, Texas is experiencing quite the oil boom at the time, and you have lots and lots of really new millionaire oil men, and with a taste for gambling, and that they don't want to go to Vegas. Really, Vegas doesn't really exist as we think of it at the time. In fact, I've heard it said that Arlington, at least in that era, was Vegas before Vegas was.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got the casino down there. There's a raid, but it's not like the cops show up and there are roulette wheels to crash and there are poker tables. They've got a way to hide away all that stuff, do they not?
They did. It was, I guess you'd call it high tech for back then. They would They had gaming tables they would fold up into the wall, and they had paintings on the bottom, so they really blended in. But the freestanding gaming tables, they would flip them over, be 4 plates attached, 4 glasses, 4 knives, forks, and spoons. And then they had a cue stick rack, which was fake, and they could put a key in the electrical socket and turn it, and it would release the rack to reveal a secret room where they could push the gambling equipment and shut it up.
Okay. Let's get back. Let's talk about you created basically a museum there. Originally, I know your husband is a former president of what was then Arlington Baptist College.
Right.
And you were the librarian bookstore manager?
I was the bookstore manager.
Okay. Now, originally, when you created the museum, you were doing it not so much to memorialize gambling, but because you were interested in another historical figure, the one and only Reverend J. Frank Norris, right?
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about J. Frank Norris, and we'll the story of how this illegal casino ends up being a Baptist university is kind of an interesting one.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about J. Frank Norris.
Well, J. Frank Norris pastored First Baptist of Fort Worth, and he's began there as a minister in 1909. And because he grew up in an alcoholic home, he was really against the drinking and the gambling and all that. And so he started trying to clean up Tarrant County. And even the Methodist ministers joined in with the Baptists in that endeavor.
We had this fundamentalist Baptist church in Fort Worth, and whether Norris is like he's sort of slipped from our consciousness now, but he's like Elmer Gantry. He's like Billy Sunday. He's like Billy Graham before Billy Graham. He's got a nationally syndicated radio show. So and he's conducting revivals all over the place. But he's got a pretty familiar target for many of those sermons, does he not?
Top of the Hill.
Top of the Hill Terrace Casino. Yeah, he's constantly he's calls it the blight of Tarrant County. He's constantly writing about it, constantly chiding elected officials to do something about it. He's calling the governor. He's giving sermons about it. Yet somehow it perseveres. In fact, at one point he says that literally someday they'll take over the top of the hill. Does he not?
Well, at a tent meeting, he vowed. He said, "Top of the Hill Terrace is a blight on Tarrant County. One of these days, we're going to own the place."
Yeah, and that would have sounded to be like a hollow threat back then. So we opened the terrace in the late 20s. It operates all the way through the 30s. In fact, it operates long after Arlington Downs is gone, as a racetrack anyway, and really keeps operating until around 1949, until finally the Texas Rangers raided one last time. And
the big raid was in 47.
47?
Led by Lone Wolf Gonzalez.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting. He raided one of Fred's other casinos. I think the one in Houston. Lone Wolf was involved in that one too.
Yeah. And I think they finally shut it down for good in
Because people were afraid to come back.
Yeah. Around 1949, they finally just sort of gave it up. Fred Browning goes away. I don't know when he finally died. Early 50s.
1953.
About 53, and then but Binion takes his money that he has there and goes to Vegas, opens Horseshoe, and it has a fairly prosperous life, except for some IRS problems.
Right.
I understand.
He did take silver bars from Top of the Hill to Las Vegas.
I got you. So, and J. Frank Norris himself, he's not around much longer after Browning either, is he?
He died before Fred. He died in 52. Fred died in 53.
So you've got this basically casino closed down. What happens to it, and how does the Fundamentalist Baptist Institute of J. Frank Norris acquire it?
Well, they were looking for a permanent home, and Dr. Oldham, who was president of Bible Baptist Seminary, which it originally was called Fundamental Baptist Bible Institute, which Dr. Norris started. So Dr. Oldham was president at the time, and he was driving by the front gates just as they were hammering the for sale sign in the ground to sell the property. So he immediately raised the down payment, and so the seminary moved in.
Yeah. At the time, the church is not really a college, is it? It's missionary training.
It was a seminary when it moved there, Bible Baptist
so it's
Seminary.
Mostly training for people who are going to go into the ministry, but they buy it anyway. By the way, one of those ministers they trained is a pretty famous alumni. You want to guess who that is?
John Birch.
John Birch. The namesake for the John Birch Society was trained out there. So they buy it. They make good. By then, Reverend Norris is deceased or about to be? But he's gone?
He died in 53. His prediction came true in 56 when we purchased the property.
And how long did it take to become Arlington Baptist College? I know it's Arlington Baptist University now.
It became Arlington Baptist College in 1972.
Took a while.
Mm-hmm.
Took a while. Okay, so we have that, and then eventually you show up, and you're running the bookstore, and you're sort of moderately interested in the gambling thing, but initially your focus is really more on J. Frank Norris and the history of the church, is it not?
Right. We have to remember I was a pastor's wife,
Correct.
yeah, for many years when my husband and I went to the Arlington Baptist College. And so I just started out with recording the history of the school. I didn't touch Top of the Hill at all.
I know.
Because most Baptists don't gamble.
You had in those days, they had those recorded radio broadcasts on these giant, they look like LP records,
Right.
but it's like a giant recording disc. And you have the world's largest collection of J. Frank Norris's radio sermons. And he's syndicated, is he not?
Right. We have 350 of those big 16-inch records with a lot of his sermons on it.
I got you. So you start with that, and you're doing it. And eventually, I think you have the cornerstone, don't you, somewhere out there for his original,
Right at the entrance.
his original church in Fort Worth. But then you're a curious person, and you see little hints of the college's former life here and there, and you sort of begin collecting a few items. Not a few items at first, and then more and more. How did you make the transition to sort of a combined history of the Fundamentalist Institute and of the gambling?
Well, the school was closed mouth almost 50 years. And when
it was something they didn't want to talk about, was it?
The students weren't allowed to talk about it at all. And so when I found this fundamentalist here from 1934, which Dr. Norris started that in 1927.
This is their publication.
Right, showing the biggest
newspaper.
giant he was fighting, and you can see it says Top of the Hill
biggest giant
Terrace.
on there has got Top of Hill
Yes.
Terrace on
So
there.
I took that. I went to my husband's office, put that on his desk. I said, I want to work on this. And I figured he was going to tell me no. He said, go ahead. And it was a scary thing, being closed-mouthed 50 years, and all of a sudden I'm going to step out, start talking about
Bring
the
it to the light.
casino. You know?
Okay. So what did you find first? I know it started off as a very small collection.
2 poker chips.
2 poker chips.
Then I found a dog collar, and right here it is. It's one of my favorite things of the collection. And it even has Fred Browning's name on it.
Just in case the dog gets lost.
Well, and
that
yes,
would have
it
been a
got
pretty
lost.
good-sized dog, wouldn't it?
But these spikes were here for two reasons. That way you couldn't get the dog down and choke it to death. And when dogs fight, they go for the neck. So Dr. Oldham wanted to throw everything away when the seminary moved in, but for some reason he saved this. And when my husband moved in as president in 1993, he handed it over to him like it was a torch. So I love this dog collar, yeah.
I got you. So, by the way, Top of Hill is kind of a Six Flags of Sin kind of place.
Right.
Not only do you have drinking, not only do you have a little excessive dining, not only do you have some risque
I
entertainment.
know where you're going with this, too.
Yeah, I know. But you also have a brothel on.
That's correct.
On site there. In fact, you have a shawl there from one of the ladies of the evening, do you not?
Yes, when the school moved in, they need a dorm space for the girls, so they were getting ready to turn the brothel into the girls' dorm. So Dr. Oldham took his wife up to the brothel, kicked at all the beautiful gowns, and he said, I want everything thrown away, which she threw everything away but two items. She kept the mirror on the wall, and she kept this cape from Neiman Marcus. And it's my favorite thing of the whole collection. She wore it to church. And I tell everyone, I don't know of another Baptist institution that has the prostitute's cape on display, but I felt like it was okay to do that since she wore it to church. It's been sanctified.
I got you. If you say so, Miss Bryant, if you say so. Now, over time, the preponderance of the collections, as you've started this museum, people have brought you more and more items, have they not? And
They have.
So what's it like now? And originally, first time I went out to see you, the museum was occupying kind of a little corner there, but it takes up pretty much most of the bookstore now, does it not?
It does. It's mainly top of the hill there. When I started...
It's about, what, 2/3 Top of Hill, 1/3 fundamentalist, something like that?
Probably the opposite.
The opposite, 2/3 fundamentalist, 1/3 Top of Hill?
No.
Okay.
But when I started collecting things, I didn't dream it would turn into what it is today.
I know. Now you got people coming from all over the state. You
All
have
over
bus
the world.
tours. Yeah, so they're coming from all over. You're getting Yelp reviews, all kinds of stuff. What's in the collection now? Give me the top two or three favorite items from the casino years and also from the fundamentalist Baptist years.
Even though no one was supposed to save anything, and I'm talking about the seminary, and people that were out there, they did, and it's like it's all coming back home. We have the card dealer's flapper dress, the card dealer's wife's flapper dress on display, and we have a dress from one of the Ruth Laird's Texas Rockets. Is one of the tap dancers that came out, ballerinas. We have her dress there. And we have acquired 2 roulette wheels.
Yeah. You gave me a poker chip years ago.
I did.
I still have $5.
Right. I tell people, if I give them a poker chip, please don't tell them that a pastor's wife gave you one.
Okay.
So you just spilled the beans there.
So how do people arrange for tours out there?
They just call or email me, and tours are by appointment. So
we'll run it as a scan at the end of this program here, so that people can give you
That'd
a
be
buzz.
good.
I know. Do you have an heir apparent? We got to find you and I are not getting any younger, so now you got to find somebody to run the museum after you've retired finally.
Yes, we do. UTA has got involved, and they started scanning the documents, scanning the artifacts. They've done an oral history interview, and now they're finishing up the interviews for a documentary.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a video coming out pretty soon.
Yes, and it's important, and they're going to film my program, so after I'm gone, a volunteer can be there to walk them around. And I told someone that when they were talking about filming my program, I said, I don't want to be in it, but I want it to be me telling the story, because meeting these people does something to your heart. And I've even, done an interview with a gangster from Top of the Hill. And when he died, we were real close.
Yeah, you've met a lot of people. I guess over the years, there probably been hundreds, thousands of people
Right.
who were there. And so you've collected some oral histories as well for this sort of thing.
I've collected many, and I interviewed Gaither Hartley. His dad worked with the tea room and stayed on with the casino, and his dad told him that the place was riddled full of tunnels from the Prohibition era. Said after that they turned them into escape tunnels. So we have this underground system, and I hope before I die
Find them all.
to prove once and for all, do we have more than one or two
So,
tunnels?
by the rumor is, by the way, that Fred took his extra cash and jewels and other materials and stashed them in a cave in a tunnel, a hidden tunnel under the casino. So you haven't found that, and
I'm not allowed to talk about that.
okay. So, well, if you find it, let us know. It'll be great.
Well, it'd be on the news, trust me.
I'll bet you. I know you're still looking for it, and I have a feeling, by the way, when Binion left for Vegas or whatever cash there was, he probably took it with him. So
Right.
I got you.
I wanted to show that I
Yeah.
brought Dr. Norris's Bible
you got
along
J.
too.
Frank Norris's
Yeah.
actual Bible.
Right,
there.
I do. Yes.
Well,
So I felt honored to be there and to tell the story. And I tear up almost every time I start
I know.
talking about
It's
it.
still emotional to you. I've been to a couple of three of your talks. It's worth catching to do that. There are a couple of oddities about the place. One of them is Binion and Fred were big horse racing connoisseurs, and they had a favorite horse there. And you can let's tell us about that in a second. And also, they had a boxer, like a world champion boxer that trained there, and he liked to train in the pool. Can you tell us a little bit about the horse and about the boxing?
Okay. Fred was interested in three things. It was gambling, horse racing, and boxing. And he had his own boxer there. His name was Lou Jenkins. He was known as the Sweet Swatter from Sweetwater.
Sweetwater from Sweetwater.
And Fred Browning managed him and traveled with him all over the United States.
He won the world title at one. I mean, he's like light middleweight or something
believe
like
so.
that category. So, but he had Jenkins liked to train in water, right? So he had a pool.
Well, they did swim in the pool there, which is still on the property today.
Indoor pool. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we have top of the hill structures. We have the front gates. We have the tea garden and the gazebo. We have the Royal Ford stable, and that horse, Royal Ford, was bred to a horse named Canfly. Their foal Hill Fly beat Seabiscuit in 1940. And Red Pollard rode Seabiscuit. He also rode horses for Fred Browning, so Red Pollard had to be out there. A horse stable. It had 12 stalls, and someone told me a tunnel came up the third stall from the left. We've got the swimming pool. We've got a tunnel that you get to see when you come in for the tour. We just unearthed a room from the casino. So almost all the structures are left from Top of the Hill days except for the brothel and the upper floor of the house. So the mid-floor and basement of the administration building at Arlington Baptist University are the original walls of the casino.
I think it'd be interesting when you go in. You think, well, I'll see a statue of Fred Browning. I'll see a statue of Benny Binion, but you don't, do you? You see
No.
a statue of
Dr. J. Frank Norris.
holding a Bible there.
And I love it that he is overlooking the drive at the place he vowed one day we would own. And his prediction came true in 1956 when we purchased the property.
Okay, thank you, Vicki, for so much for being here, and thanks to you for listening to Arlington Archives. If you want to learn more, take a museum tour. We'll post it. We'll have a link. Be sure to subscribe and share this podcast for more stories historical photos, and ways to get involved in Arlington's 150th anniversary, visit arlington150.com and follow at City of Arlington on social media. Until next time, let's keep honoring our past and pave the way for what's next. The story of Arlington is still being written, and you are part of it. So long.